These residential areas are not your typical suburbs of London or New York. They're actually Israeli settlements in occupied Palestinian territories, and they're illegal. In fact, their existence may amount to a war crime, according to the International Criminal Court. They're considered an active violation of international law and a major obstacle to peace. But what are Israeli settlements? And why are they so controversial? In 1948, Zionist paramilitary groups attacked hundreds of Palestinian cities and towns to make way for the establishment of Israel. More than 750,000 Palestinians were displaced as a result, and the State of Israel was established on 72% of the land. What remained was the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. 20 years later, and after the Six-Day War with surrounding Arab countries, Israel occupied what remained of historic Palestine. The occupation was declared illegal by the UN, and it demanded Israel withdraw from the territories. Instead, Israel began building settlements in these areas and started moving its citizens there. This violated the Fourth Geneva Convention, which states that an occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies. Despite international condemnation, successive Israeli governments, both on the political left and right, continued to build settlements. They offered financial incentives and subsidized housing to encourage Jewish citizens to populate them. Even during talks with Palestinians in the so-called peace process, settlements continued to grow. Since the signing of the Oslo Accords in 1993, the settler population has increased by more than double. The Oslo Accords promised Palestinians a state along the pre-1967 borders, where the settlements were being built. As of 2018, there are more than 670,000 settlers living in 250 settlements and outposts across the West Bank and East Jerusalem. They make up 11% of Israel's total population. The majority of these settlements are built on Palestinian land bought or confiscated by Israel's government, controlling more than 40% of the West Bank. Some settlements have their own mayors, schools, shopping centers, and even universities. This, of course, includes dozens of unofficial outposts built by Israelis without permission from Israeli authorities. But the settlements aren't just a legal dilemma. They have entrenched Israel's occupation and led to continued violations of the rights of Palestinians. They're interconnected by a network of Jewish-only roads leading to Israel, guarded by Israeli soldiers and military outposts. Each settlement is surrounded by a buffer zone, made up of walls, fences, and gates, and Palestinians must pass through checkpoints to get from one side to the other. Human Rights Watch also says that Palestinians in the West Bank have less access to water and electricity than settlers and have to pay more for it. In the villages surrounding these settlements, Palestinian residents often face repeated acts of what's described as state-backed settler violence. This ranges from vandalism of property and uprooting of olive trees to torching fields and physical assault, which often results in injuries and, in some cases, death. Israel's government is now considering annexing the settlement blocks in the West Bank along with the Jordan Valley, prompted by the Trump administration's controversial Middle East plan. If annexation goes ahead, it might not change much for Palestinians on the ground, whose day-to-day lives are already impacted by settler-only roads, checkpoints, and the 70-kilometer-long separation barrier. But it could effectively mean an end to the so-called peace process, which always included the withdrawal of settlers from occupied territories as one of its preconditions. It would also mean more land loss for Palestinians who continue to live under the longest military occupation in modern history.